Hello, parents, educators, and nerdy D&D fans. You have found our new home for Area of Effect, a talk show where we discuss how tabletop role-playing games benefit the whole family. We're currently in process of shifting all our old but golden episodes over to this new channel by posting a new episode every weekday until we catch back up to our new episodes. We would love your help getting this new channel up and running with a follow, share, or review. And thanks for joining us on our quest to bring more adventurers to the table.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Kids Table Podcast.
When you're sitting around the D&D table telling a story with kids, eventually they're going to have to talk to somebody in the story. These non-player characters, or NPCs, can make or break a good storytelling session. A good NPC conveys information and keeps the story going, but a great NPC gives the players something to talk about for sessions to come. Take this fan-favorite NPC from the second season of our actual play show, The Kids Table.
Do you know how much it would cost?
Oh, I'm sure I don't know that. But I'm sure if you ask the Chamberlain, he could probably tell you.
Where can I find him?
In the castle.
Money isn't everything.
Money isn't everything.
But it helps a lot.
That is true.
Thank you very much, kind.
Oh, absolutely.
Host.
My name is Floodward Brandywood. If you have any other needs, I would.
I'm sorry. Would you say that for me 3 times quickly?
Floodward Brandywood, Floodward Brandywood, Floodward Brandywood, at your service, ma'am.
Landward Blandy. Wait.
Oh no, that's okay. That's hard.
Could we give you a nickname?
I guess that would be all right. What would you like to call me?
Flotty.
Flotty, just like my older brother. And you can see the smile on his face becomes a little bit more brittle, but he doesn't want to offend Aragon, and so he rolls with it.
Okay.
What is it that makes Flodwords so memorable? And where do you get NPCs from anyway? In this episode of Area of Effect, Allison talks with Kurt from the podcast Sidekicks and Sidequests about what makes NPCs memorable and how to craft those NPCs that your players enjoy interacting with.
Welcome to Area of Effect, a podcast by The Kids Table, where we discuss how tabletop RPGs benefit kids and answer your questions about playing TTRPGs with the kids at your own table. Today, we have a special guest, Kurt, from the podcast Sidekicks and Sidequests, the unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps put humans back in humanity and breathe life into campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. On a personal note, Ryan and I were lucky enough to be guests last year on episode 124, where we worked together with Kurt to create an NPC, Finnegan the Brave, the Elemental Farrier, and it was an absolute blast. Welcome, Kurt.
Hello, Allison. Good to be back and talking.
It's very fun to have this come full circle. You know, I was appreciating you today as I was thinking about when we were on your show, because you were the first person that ever invited us to like be on a show or collaborate in any way. And it was like 2 months after we started. That was amazing that you like reached out to us when we were that brand new. And I really appreciate that little kind of booster right at the beginning.
Well, not a problem. If I try to go back in my memory and recall, like, how did I first find out about the Kids Table D&D? I think it was through Instagram, you know, because the hobby as a whole kind of has this diaspora where they've gone out to all different corners of social media to try and find and make new sorts of pockets of community. And so I've been finding like, oh, I'm actually kind of doing okay on Instagram. So I guess I'll try this Instagram thing. And, through recommendations and algorithms and things popping up, a couple of like practical advice tips came up, or like you were like pitching the podcast. And so I was like, oh, these guys are cool. I was like, wow, they really care about education and kids. And my family background, both of my parents were special education teachers. So like teaching's in my my wheelhouse a little bit. Not that I was ever a teacher, but like I dig teachers. Teachers are cool. We need teachers to help kids.
We love teachers.
All of us, the community.
Teachers
we
do
love
not
teachers.
Get a tenth of the credit and appreciation that they should for the very hard day-to-day work that they do.
Yeah. So I think I was taking my son to the park, and I think that's where I remember sending you the message to be like, hey, I think you guys are doing something cool. I happen to do a silly thing. You should come on, be a guest on my podcast. And you both were like, yes, we'll do this. And
we're like, oh my gosh, someone likes us. We had like 100 followers. I was like, somebody actually knows who we are. Anyway, so I was curious. I don't remember learning this about you on the podcast. Maybe my memory is just faulty. But I was curious about your background with TTRPGs. Obviously, you're a big time fan if you're having this whole podcast about NPCs. But like, when did it start? Did you play as a child? Do you play with your own kid? I know he's quite young. Or just family members in general? What's your experience?
Yeah, great question. So at the time of this recording, we're coming up on Halloween, and that's actually the anniversary of when I played in college. So the first time I played was Halloween night 2010, when I was still an undergrad in college on the 5-year plan for my undergrad in music. And yeah, had my apartment roommates and some buddies from the school band. We all got together, and it was 4th edition, which I know some people out there are like, oh, what edition? I never heard of it.
Everyone skips from 3
people
to 5.
Are like, yeah, but it's like, no, 4th was a great system to start in, to learn the basics. Because growing up, sure, I played a lot of Command and Conquer, Red Alert. There were other, GoldenEye and some of these other kinds of games eventually that would come along through the 90s and early 2000s that are like, oh, I get to be a character and make up stuff. And maybe culturally I sort of knew about Dungeons and Dragons, but never actually played. And it wasn't until I got to college, and obviously as a young adult, you're free and, you're experiencing and trying new things. And so, my nerd buddies from the band were like, hey, we've been playing D&D for years. Do you guys want to try? And we were like, sure. And I rolled up a wizard. His name was Otto von Krieg.
Ooh.
And he was buddies. My roommate, Steve, was like a dwarven cleric. And we came up with the story that like he and I had like teamed up because we had helped each other along the road. And we formed this adventuring company called the Winter Contingency Trading Company, which is you can timestamp date it. That's when Halo Reach was out. And the Winter Contingency was like a plot point or something in the game. So that was the name of our adventuring company, was the Winter Contingency Trading Company. And eventually his, Steve's wife and then fiance, but now wife, and, a couple of our other buddies all got together. And we rotated dungeon masters. So my buddy Zane started us off, but then like when one of us thought of an adventure, that's where I first got my experience of running D&D and learning some very hard lessons at the outset of like, what are the do's and don'ts of being a good dungeon master? And then, ever since then I had the bug and, played through 4th edition and then started when 5th edition started up. And so I've been happy and content with the 2014 rules and, maybe borrowing a few things from the newest rules, but I haven't actually sat down to read the new books or see what they say. But it's like, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I mean, I guess you tweak it a little bit now and then, but fundamentally the 5th edition still works for my purposes, so that's the game I'll keep playing.
That's awesome. And are you playing in an ongoing campaign right now, or even just like periodic one shots?
So at this past weekend at time of recording, I just was at FateCon, the second annual FateCon, so I got to run some one shots there. But otherwise, I've done a little bit of stuff with startplaying.games, like kind of doing some one-on-one games, but but I've been running a one-on-one game with my friend from Catherine, who listeners of my podcast will know. She's a phenomenal artist and she's a great collaborator. She's an awesome storyteller. But yeah, I've been DMing a one-on-one campaign for her over Google Docs. And so for like I think coming up on 2 years, essentially think of it as like you're getting to play D&D a little bit every day as you write back and forth to each other instead of over message boards, just a shared Google Doc that you just write back and forth on. And we've been playing D&D that way for like the last 2 years. And it's been fun.
Amazing.
Like ups and downs, drama, peril, all this stuff. Silly shenanigans, the whole shebang.
I love it. Well, you and I must be D&D siblings because I started in 2011. But I did start with Pathfinder and then kind of jumped to 5e. So yeah, what's 4? I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever tried to dabble into role-playing games with your son?
Yes. So last year, Halloween, my wife ran a one-shot, kids-appropriate one-shot adventure. And so he and I teamed up together. And if I remember the story, we had like little wooden pegs that we like stylized into like little people. So they kind of looked like chess pieces or whatever. We colored them and doodled them. And then it was like a sequence of like activities or things that he had to do because some evil dragon had stolen all the Halloween candy. And so we had to go from house to house and like help each monster solve a problem or do an activity. And then that would give us the items that we needed to then be able to just have a big slug out fight on top of the mountain to try and rescue all the Halloween candy. So, and then a couple of times I think we did end up with TTRPG Kids with she released a bundle of like a couple of different adventures. We've done at least one of those, but that's about the extent. A couple times he's seen me, like, oh, hey buddy, I have to go do my podcast now, or oh, I'm getting ready for D&D stuff, and he's like, well, I want to play D&D, and he has a couple of the Monster Compendium books to read, the kid age ones that like his godparents have gotten him, or we've gotten him, or his grandparents have gotten him. So like he is around the D&D stuff, but like we haven't sat down really. And I think it's mainly just because of his focus, his maturity, his like, he's fine with his tablet or playing Xbox, but like getting him to sit down and like stay focused on an adventure, that is something that we'd have to work on.
Well, it sounds like he's caught the bug. I have a feeling he'll fall more and more into it. I'm very impressed that your wife was able to homebrew a engaging kids campaign.
Yeah, and I mean, she started as well in that 4th edition game. Like, we started dating. I was like, oh, I'm doing this D&D thing. She's like, I don't know, that's weird. But then she watched us play, and then she's like, oh, actually, hey, that's kind of cool. So then she joined in on the 4th edition group, and she's kind of like jumped in, like off and on. But, she's a big Critter fan, and, we're going to be going to see them when they come to the DFW area next Christmas time. So we had to buy our tickets early, but we're good to go for Fort Worth. So Travis Willingham running a game. So
that'll be amazing. I got to go to the Search for Grog in LA. That was like 2019, I want to say. It was pretty great.
And we went to the Austin show when it was the Darrington Brigade.
Nice.
So we were there at that show live. Yeah, because that was just a straight shot down from Dallas down to Austin. So that was just a couple hours of driving. That was nothing.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your podcast. For my listeners that don't know your podcast yet, if they don't, tell us about the inspiration behind starting it.
Sure, yeah. Selfless plug for the live episode that just would have come out at the time of this recording, the panel I did with Mandy Greeny, and where I shared a little bit about this, but essentially what started it was I was doing a podcast with my good buddy Anson, who's a supporter of the podcast. I certainly appreciate his support. So we were doing our own personal podcast, sort of in the style of like, Roderick on the Line or No Dumb Questions. If kids are listening, they won't know what that is, and that's okay. Mom and Dad might. But anyway, that was a personal podcast we were doing. Like, hey, this podcasting thing is kind of fun. We're in our 30s. We could do this. Early 30s at this point. And then, then we're like, oh, work is getting busy. I think we got to shutter this. And I was like, well, I'm not done podcasting. And I really enjoyed the one D&D episode that we got to do. And I got to kind of be like the subject matter expert on it. So what if I did something like that, ooh, and I liked it when we interviewed people. Okay, so what if I did D&D and then I interviewed people, and then at that right time I saw like some random social media post where it was like this is from r/shower thoughts.
Yeah.
So those deep thought-provoking thoughts that you have when you're in the shower, and it was, everybody else in your life is an NPC. And being someone of faith, I was like, well, I think there's more to it than that. But it does seem that perception, like, we only have our own experiences in our own bodies. And, you know, we're really close with our close friends and our close family and such like that. But, you know, unless I really take the time to get to know you, like Allison, like, you know, we would have to, like, you know, break bread together and hang out and, like, really, you know, party it up for me to feel to come to a place to be like, I know Allison. Like, Allison is, like, I know her. She's cool. So otherwise, we kind of just regard each other as NPCs, and the more invested you are in them, the more you remember, oh, they're humanity. Oh, they're a person. They have thoughts and feelings and life goals and wants and wishes and all these things that make them a human person. And so thinking of that, combining all of that in a big mixing bowl, I was like, I don't think anyone else is doing anything sort of like this. It's a very niche, weird idea. But what if I did like an interview show, like I ask a few basic questions, we get to learn about my guest as a person, and then we do something silly. We get to make up an NPC. It could be like, hey, I want to put like a version of Chewbacca in my game because I love Chewbacca. Or, hey, let's just roll some dice, give ourselves some rails, some constraints, some challenges with figuring out how we're going to make these disparate elements work. Kind of like how people are in real life, where there's a bunch of disparate elements, but somehow they work as a person. And then, you know, give them a side quest so then you could stick them in your game or your character backstory. And then your world would feel a little more interesting. Like Matt Colville says, you have verisimilitude in the world. Like, you actually believe it, and it's not you just being like, okay, we're in town. There's Nurse Joy. There's Officer Jenny. There's the French baker over there from Beauty and the Beast. Like, we know all these people. Like, no, you're in a new town. Here's a new cast of characters. Now, you know, depending on like how focused you are on them, but you could be like, oh, there's more Tritons in this town than there were in the last town. I wonder why that reason is. And so make your characters and your player characters think, wow, this is a really dynamic world. My dungeon master is doing an awesome job of making this like a real life video game, but even better.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend listening to the podcast for any DMs out there, because it can be like creatively draining to keep coming up with NPCs that have that rich of a deep backstory going on. So, I mean, you say in the show, like, borrow this character, right? So you're doing the hard work.
Please.
I mean, listen to the podcast, borrow some of the characters, and your players will be very impressed.
And then, you know, write about it on our subreddit and tell us the stories. Because kind of like how Marvel introduced in their popular TV programs and movies the idea of a multiverse and variants with the Loki show, is like, oh, we could have Jacqueline the Goblin Blacksmith, but Jacqueline the Goblin Blacksmith in your game might not run exactly the same as it was in the podcast, because your world has different assumptions or restrictions when it comes to goblins, because you're running like a no thank you evil campaign, so there can't be like any real like violence or something in your game. Okay, well, Jacqueline's just like the goofy goblin in town is like, oh man, those orcs are so mean and they stole. I wish I could, you know, be a better blacksmith, but they have that book. If you got that book from them, then I could be a better blacksmith. Versus like, oh, the orcs, they vex me. I must seek vengeance against them. So like different tones for different games and such. But we could have like a whole multiverse of just like one character. And that would be fascinating to see, like, all the different reflections. And then how cool would it be for you out there? You go on the subreddit and you're reading about the 20 different versions of one of the characters from the podcast. If it ever got to this point, it would be amazing if they did, because then it could be like, oh, you're not just dealing with this one version of this character. Now you're dealing with the other versions of this character from all the other, multiverses or whatever. That'd be a silly idea. I think you should do that, listeners. Take a famous NPC like from the Wizards of the Coast property and tweak them and then introduce the idea of variants and then see how many different versions of Jarlaxle you could get, like Loki or something like that.
That's a very cool idea, and I think it reflects how, you know, maybe it is the same person, but they behave differently in these different contexts that they're put in, like when they're under threat, or if they're seen as an authority, or if they're seen as an underling, right? Like, they're going to behave differently. And, you know,
Yes.
people are multifaceted, so they behave differently in different situations anyway. Your comment about, like, thinking about other people as, like, deeper than kind of the generic understanding of NPCs, I had to Google what is that term, because Sonder, have you heard the term? Yeah. Sonder is the realization that each random passerby is living life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, routines, and worries. This concept was coined by John Koenig in his Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. I don't know. I gotta look up who that is. But when I came across that term, I was like, yes, that's like when my brain has those, like, pull back 10,000 feet moments in random public situations, especially when there's, like, a lot of people around, just suddenly feeling overwhelmed with, like, all the complexity that's in the world compared to my, like, little life.
Yeah, which is why I think it's all the, you know, Sonder, all this reason why everyone should just be more conscious and aware and more empathetic. It seems like these days empathy is hard to come by, or sympathy is hard to come by, and we're not made to be that way. Like, we need to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person around us. You know, not everyone is ones and zeros. They were not programmed here in a matrix simulation in a video game. No, they're thinking, biological, feeling, embodied souls, man. You can't be mean to people, is what I'm saying. You can't be mean.
100% agree. All right, so let's get to talking about NPCs. We said we were going to talk about NPCs today, and that's kind of your area of expertise. With over 150 episodes creating NPCs, I certainly think that qualifies you as an expert if you just go by the sheer number of hours you've put into it. Yeah, so for the people out there who are listening, what would be your 3 best tips for DMs on creating NPCs?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I know I got these questions earlier, and I was trying to think and be like, what would be my advice? Well, I mean, and I feel like the advice is just going to be best for thinking along the lines of, like, one, like, what inspires you? What do you think is fun? You should put that in your game. So those are the kinds of NPCs that should be in your world. 2, you know, what are the elements in your player characters' backstories? Like, if they've invented factions, if they've invented countries or regions or plots or peril, that you should stick that in your game and have NPCs that reflect those kinds of things. And then 3, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a good basic set of random tables. Even for me in my game, I'll use my podcast table where I'm like, okay, my player character is going to come across a mercenary. Okay, let me roll on the D100 a couple times and see what sparks joy. Oh, a Mind Flayer mercenary? Well, I did say that this was the Spellweaver Syndicate, so that's like an arcane sort of, oh, they could be one of the spellcasting Mind Flayers, and suddenly you're in this European-esque sort of forest ambushing a bunch of people who've captured a bunch of treants and stuff like that, and then suddenly when they the captain of the sergeant of the guard post comes out to see what all the kerfuffle's about. Oh, that's a Mind Flayer. I was not expecting a Mind Flayer to be here. Suddenly there's tension and drama from just a seemingly bunch of random dice rolls that were not introduced beforehand.
That's very cool. Do you make your own tables, or I know some of them are from your followers that, like, submit ideas?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the elements in the table are totally randomized from before, but my thing with the podcast is anyone who uses my random tables, like, they take a response, they get to leave a response. So over time, yes, the responses have continued to grow and be more variable. So it's not just me injecting my own bias into the random tables. It's like other people that I've randomly talked to, and maybe a response is held on for like 3 years, and now the dice are rolling. Eureka! This is the thing we needed. I I think it's good to prompt your players. Let them participate in a little bit of the world building. Whether it's going to be the I know a guy rule that's been shared, homebrewed online of like your players are stuck. They don't know how they're going to solve this. Allow them to go, hey, I know a guy. And then kind of work with them to get like, okay, well, what are they like? And then, okay, then you can riff on that, on play on that. Or you just give them a blank check. And you're like, okay, hey, well, you're going to go to this place. Tell me something about these people that operate the Merchants Guild. Like, what, I don't know, what's something interesting? What would make you more engaged in it because you had to sit and think about what was going to be exciting about, this random group of people. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think inviting players to build the world is perhaps even more important with kids because a lot of times kids are just given the scenario or like told what to do. But when you're inviting the kids to create the world alongside you, kids have incredible imaginations and they don't really have the limitations that adults have. Like once we've like consumed maybe a lot of movies in the fantasy genre, we know that there are like repeat tropes, kind of stereotypes that always happen. So I think that actually, while you may think it expands your ideas, maybe it does at first, but I think if like you've seen a certain saturation point of one genre, it kind of limits your ideas because you're like, oh, a ranger is always an elf that lives in the forest with a bow and arrow. But that's not necessarily true. But that's like what you might picture because that's what you've seen in the movies or read about in books. But kids maybe haven't absorbed that much of those like pop cultural elements. So they would be like, oh, my ranger is a bear that lives in the Arctic and likes to burrow in caves and is friends with little rabbits. I don't know. Like they're going to come up with something that you would, as an adult, would be like, I never would have thought of that. So I love that.
My son is his start with a little bit of a start with DMing because again, I mentioned that one-on-one game I'm running. I was like, I rolled up randomly for like, what's this wizard character that my player character is going to meet in this faction of magic people? And I rolled up randomly and I was like, Flumph. I was like, okay, all right, let me work with that. I was like, Flumps have, I don't know about the naming conventions. My son was younger at that point, but I showed him a picture of a Flumph and I said, what's his name? And he went, Hippopotamus. And I said, great. So when my player character met with this magic faction, I said, oh, the agent that's helping you. You see a Flumph wearing a very Fantasia style wizard's hat. And the Flumph introduces himself as Hippopotamus, and she has a GIF fighter in her little JRPG party. So Bellamy Copperpot, the GIF fighter, was like, "Oh, your name's Hippopotamus, and I'm a GIF. I'm like kind of a hippo person. That's kind of interesting." So it was a bit of interesting storytelling there. And Catherine, who maintains her own art account, made a little bit of fan art of Hippopotamus. So you can see what Hippopotamus looks like. I'll try and see if I can find a link to that.
Yeah, send it to me. I can link it in the show notes. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so I think their imagination is a little freer than adults tend to be. And then I also think just it's so empowering to them to be invited to create the world alongside adults. Like they'll play their own imagination games, but oftentimes there's kind of a divide between the kids' imaginary games and the adults who are like, I don't do that. But when you're at the D&D table, everybody gets to do it together, and it's just a really amazing experience. So, as we played earlier in the show, the fan favorite NPC from season 2 of the Kids Table has hands down been Flodward Brandywood. Hopefully I said that properly. Who is the concierge and host of Cafe Carpathia. Who, Kurt, is a memorable NPC to you that you love either from a show you've watched or a game that you've personally played?
That's a great question. Do I go back into the old archives of my mind? Do I find someone more recent? Well, I mean, maybe because I'm going on nostalgia lane and thinking about him. Probably the first NPC who helped to, lead me into the world of TTRPGs. My buddy Zane was the dungeon master at the time who ran us in that very first game on Halloween night. And the NPC was Brother Griffin was his name. So he was supposed to be like this wizard cleric sort of a guy. At this point, back in 2010, like that's 15 years ago, like almost. So it's like I'm having to cast my mind back into the past to try and remember. But yeah, Brother Griffin was cool. You know, he went on adventures, so I guess he sort of served the function as like a religious leader, but also like the town wizard. So he would go off on adventures, and we would get called on, you know, to like help him or assist him. And I think if I remember, because Brother Griffin went missing somewhere underground in the Underdark, maybe, or just the dungeons of somewhere. And so my wizard character, we're adventuring, and we come across like a stone golem. And I think I remember and Zane was cool. He would let us try insane stuff. Like in that same dungeon, I remember finding a bunch of old abandoned books. And I said, can I do like a Arcana check to like make a magic item book so that like if I wrote in one book, it would show up in another book? And I rolled really well. And Zane was like, congratulations, you've invented text messaging in Dungeons and Dragons. So like we would give books out to people, to important people, to be like, here, keep this book. I will write to you in it, and you can write to me back. But in that same dungeon, because we were going to find Brother Griffin, I found this stone golem. I rolled some Arcana checks, and I ended up gaining control of him, and I named him Heinrich. And I tried to get Heinrich to like steamroll us through a bunch of stuff, but Zane cleverly would be like, oh, he's having to punch through like 50 feet of solid stone, so he's going to be a while. So yeah, I think Brother Griffin was kind of like a fun one. I could go through all sorts of popular media, whether it's, you know, like Boba Fett, as he's appeared in the Mandalorian shows over time. You know, some of the characters that have shown up in other popular media. I mean, I know Critical Role, of course, has innumerable NPCs that have been delightful in that show. So really, I think I think people could stand to do more with focusing on focusing on the people who aren't the main cast. And probably one of the most commonly cited responses I get whenever I ask the question, who's your favorite NPC or sidekick? Time and time again, Samwise Gamgee ends up being like the most often picked. And I think it's because there's some universal good truths that are communicated through him as a sidekick character.
Oh, I love that. That's great. But my favorite from Critical Role that I always think of first is Gilmore from Gilmore's Glorious Goods. There's something about a good voice, and I think that's a lot of why Flawed Brandywood does it for me, is the voice. I wish I was a better voice actor, but sadly I'm not.
And the sass. You can't forget the sass.
Yes, the sass. Absolutely. I love it.
Like, how do you say your name? Yeah. Safaina. Yes. Yeah. Okay, then he just leaves because he's had enough at that point.
So snarky. Yeah. Like, that's the nickname my brother calls me. Thanks a lot.
And you learn so much about him as a character. Yeah. Like, taking that, like, parents can, like, really, like, maybe kids have a harder time understanding, but parents are like, oh, he really revealed a lot about himself in just those small bits of dialogue.
Oh, yeah. I feel like he's got a lot of layers to him, and hopefully he'll show up in season 3.
Ogres are like onions. They have layers.
Yep. All right. Well, Kurt, in wrapping this up, let us know, where can our audience find you, and do you have any plugs for projects you're working on right now?
Well, thank you so much, Allison, for allowing me to guest on Area of Effect as part of the Kids Table D&D podcast network empire. Wow. You can find most everything of mine if you just go to sidekicksandsidequests.com. That's all spelled out, no ampersands or anything like that. But that's where you're going to get links to all the various social media platforms I'm on, like the big ones like Facebook and Instagram and Threads and X and Blue Sky, and you know, some of those other ones that are more defunct than others, and YouTube, because I do back up the podcast to YouTube as well, and occasionally you can at least see, at the time of this recording, at least two live episodes that I did at FateCon, and then I'm also collecting my Parlays at the Platter episodes. Those are like my big panel style episodes where I invite guests of the podcast who all share like a love or expertise on a subject. And we kind of talk about an interesting intersection between a couple of different points and how it all relates to D&D. So I've been pretty proud of those episodes, as well as all the very many cool NPCs and the guest interviews I've been able to do. So yeah, just sidekicksandsidequests.com. Find us on all the major podcasting platforms and YouTube. And then I've got Patreon if you want to support. The more Patreon support I can get, or Ko-fi support, means I can just continue to keep everything afloat and doing this fun passion project because I think it matters. I'll go ahead and say, I won't say who, but on a recent Parlays at the Platter that I recorded that will premiere on the public RSS feed, hopefully around Christmas time, when the mics were off, the guest of the panel said, "Wow, I can't believe how much I needed to be on this panel. It was really special to do this and have these kinds of conversations because they matter." So that's why I think, as goofy as it may be to roll some dice and make up an NPC, really it's like sitting around a campfire and having deep conversations about life and humanity and finding out what really makes us us beneath the surface, beneath just the basic on the surface dice rolls and ones and zeros and all that stuff.
Incredible. Well said, Kurt. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Area of Effect. Check out our original actual play D&D show with kids at the table on YouTube, social media, or your favorite podcast app. Be a part of the ongoing conversation by emailing your questions for a future episode to questions@kidstablednd.com. Find resources to bring the adventure to your own table, or sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a drop at www.thekidstablednd.com. And join us on our quest to bring more kids to the D&D table while gaining early access to new episodes and exclusive behind-the-scenes content at patreon.com/thekidstablednd. Because when kids are at the table, everyone wins.